With many states across the country slowly opening back up from lockdown, many NBA fans are ready for basketball to return and entertain the world. However, in this new world, there are some new precautions that must be paid attention to, and that also applies to large sports organizations with many people. As a result, many of the logistics of social distancing, wearing masks, and centralized crowds are difficult to figure out. But these issues will likely not stop the NBA from resuming play at some point and filling the sports void. So in order to resume the season and start the playoffs, the NBA has come up with a bubble concept. This is when 1,500 people that are part of or employed by the league are isolated in a central location to finish off the 2019-2020 NBA season. All of the players, coaches, and hotel staff will need to stay isolated from the rest of the world for most likely 3 months. Now, there are a variety of locations that could fit the criteria that the NBA will need to accomplish this, and they already have a few in mind. Disney World in Orlando could be a possibility because it is now basically an abandoned city without any tourists able to visit. Even Disney themselves offered the NBA their property to finish off the season. This offer is either for publicity or genuine, but it doesn't really matter because it would be cool to watch players interact with each other in an empty Magic Kingdom. Another place could be Las Vegas because the normal touristy town has been hit hard by this lockdown and could gain a lot from hosting the NBA. Vegas is also a potential market for a new NBA team, so I'm sure the league would love to test to see the viewership they would get from playing the rest of the season there. The final serious location that the NBA could finish the season at is Seattle, for obvious reasons that the city already has a huge market and an NBA fan base. One of the potential drawbacks would be that there doesn't seem like there are enough isolated hotels and basketball arenas in Seattle compared to Disney World or Vegas, which could complicate some things. The first two locations are more touristy places, so there would not be as much worry of virus transmission. But Seattle has many inhabitants, and it could be a problem for the NBA's isolation plan. So to play out the rest of the season, the league and every team would be required to take certain precautions. One of these precautions have already been put in place where every team had to assign a member of their staff to be the faculty hygiene officer. My guess is that this person's job is to make sure that everyone in the organization is washing their hands and wearing masks as often as possible. It will truly be interesting to see an N95 masked LeBron, or any other player really, drive in the lane and posterize a masked center. Now, despite these precautions, there are some concerns over if a plan like this would even work. The first thing is, it has been almost 2 full months since the last NBA game, and many players are out of game shape. Although some players have large properties where they are working out and staying in shape, other players live in apartments with little space to stay conditioned, and some just lack motivation to work out by themselves. The differences in player conditioning could result in bad basketball for fans to watch on TV, but I think it would be funny to watch thick Jokic and others run up and down the court. There have been some ideas to have a 3-week training camp to get players into game shape, but that would just delay the season even more, and I don't think it's really a good idea. Besides, some players that live in states that have already opened up are permitted to work out in team facilities. Another concern is because of the isolation of the players and other members of the NBA, no one would be able to see their families until the season is over. This is one of the major hang-ups in restarting the season. The final concern is that fans would not be allowed in the arenas to watch games. This is to maintain immunity within the NBA. This could be a problem for certain players because they're used to playing in front of crowds and gaining energy to play better for their fans. This would probably be the most detrimental to the Philadelphia 76ers because of their unbelievable home versus away records. But let's pretend that all these concerns are figured out and the NBA was ready to restart the season. Now, I'm not exactly sure where I got this from, either Twitter, Reddit, or maybe even in my dreams. But I saw a rumor that if the NBA resumed the season, they would start the playoffs right away and stick with the current standings. Also, I saw that instead of starting the playoffs with the first 8 seeds in each conference, the playoffs would start with the first 6 seeds, shortening the time it would take to find a champion. I'm sorry, Mavericks, Grizzlies, Nets, and Magic fans. So let's take a look at my mock of how this version of the playoffs would turn out. Yeah, so I definitely had to be dreaming about the top 6 NBA seed playoffs because when I tried to make my predictions, it was hard to figure out without teams getting byes in the playoffs, which I don't think would happen. So let's just show my predictions if the NBA playoffs started with the current top 8 seeds in each conference. So let's start out with the Western Conference first. The the 1 seed Lakers versus the 8 seed Grizzlies. I think this is pretty easy to tell. I think it's going to be a sweep. The Lakers are just clearly better with Anthony Davis, LeBron, and overall their bench and their role players. The Grizzlies are an up-and-coming team with Ja Morant, and I'm sure they're going to be adding some more pieces in the future, but I think the Lakers are just better in round 1 and would crush the Grizzlies in the playoffs. The next matchup is the number 4 seed Jazz and the 5 seed Thunder, led by Chris Paul. As a result of this COVID situation, the Jazz have rumored to have some chemistry issues with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. Accurate they are, and if that would be detrimental to the team. But in general, I think the Thunder are good enough to take the Jazz to 7 games, and I think this series would be really close, but the Jazz would ultimately win and go on to the next round to face the Lakers. For the next matchup, it would be the 2 seed Clippers and the 7 seed Mavericks, led by Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis. The Clippers have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. I'm assuming they're both going to be healthy, and I think they're just a better team and overall have better players on the team. So I think the Clippers would take it pretty easily in a 6-game series, and the Mavericks are also a young team. They're up and coming. Luka's looking really good, and his chemistry with KP is developing pretty nice. So I think they're going to be a good team in the future, but just not this year. The final matchup in the first round is the 3 seed Nuggets versus the 6 seed Rockets, and the Nuggets would have Jokic and Jamal Murray, and everyone would be healthy, but I think the Rockets are a very good team, especially with James Harden and Russell Westbrook. However, their chemistry just doesn't seem there. The team's just really whack this year, so I think the Nuggets would have it in a 7-game series, but you never know. Maybe the Rockets could beat the Nuggets. In round 2, I have the Lakers playing the Jazz, and I think this series would go to 6 games because the Lakers are just clearly a better team, and once again, the Jazz might have chemistry issues between their stars, but I think they can get 2 games on him, but ultimately, AD, LeBron would be too much for Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, and Jingles to handle, But you never know, it's the playoffs, anything could really happen. Then the second series in the second round of the Western Conference would be the Clippers versus Nuggets, and I think just Kawhi Leonard and Paul George would take over this game, just shut down the Nuggets offense pretty completely. I think the series would go to 6 games with home wins maybe in Denver, but ultimately the Clippers will win and move on. Finally, in the Western Conference Finals, it would be Lakers-Clippers, basically what most people predicted in the beginning of the season. And to many people's surprise, I think the Clippers will win because I'm assuming after this long hiatus, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George will be healthy and ready to take on LeBron and AD. LeBron probably is going to take a little bit longer to get up to game speed, so I don't think he will be playing as well in previous playoffs. And I think in a 7-game series, the Clippers would win and move on to the NBA Finals. Now for round 1 of the Eastern Conference, we have the number 1 seed Bucks versus the number 8 seed Magic. The Magic have been pretty mediocre in my opinion this season. I know they're the 8th seed, but I think they'd get pretty beaten up by the Bucks. I think they could get like 1 game, maybe if the Bucks had an off night after like 3 straight wins in the beginning of the series. The Magic could get 1 win at home, but ultimately the Bucks will definitely beat them in round 1. The second game in round 1 would be the Heat and the Pacers, the 4th versus the 5 seed, and the Heat have been looking really good this year. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and everyone they have there. They've really been playing well as a team, and the Pacers don't really seem as good with Victor Oladipo as they did in previous seasons. So I think that this series would go to 7 games, but the Heat would ultimately win. The third game in the East would be the Raptors versus the Nets, the 2 versus the 7th seed, and the Nets would actually have KD and Kyrie back, I'm assuming, and the Raptors would just be pretty normal. This series is probably the most intriguing out of all of them in the East because of the aspect of KD, but I think ultimately after 7 games the Raptors will win, and Siakam is just having a really fire season right now, and hopefully this quarantine didn't really cool him off, and I think the Raptors would go on to the next round. Finally, the last matchup in round 1 would be the 3 seed Celtics versus the 6 seed 76ers. And although the Celtics have a pretty good team and they have really built around Kemba Walker, this team actually reminds me a lot of the Isaiah Thomas Celtics teams from a few years back. I think that they really have a vulnerability at center, and Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Al Horford would just overpower them with their size and go on to the next round after 6 games. I think the Sixers are going to do pretty well in the playoffs, and they're kind of built for the playoffs. In round 2 of the Eastern Conference playoffs, I have the number 1 seed Bucks versus the 4 seed Heat, and I think this series would go to 6 games. The Bucks have Giannis and would overpower the Heat eventually, although the Heat's team is really good. And I just think Giannis's strength and physicality is just going to overpower the Heat and would propel them to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they would be playing the matchup between the 2 seed Raptors and the 6 seed 76ers. You guys are going to say I'm biased, but I think the Sixers would win this series. They are just basically built for the playoffs. Their size and the way that they play is kind of slow. It's not really fitting for the regular season, but for the playoffs, that's how every team plays. And the Raptors would do good with Siakam, but this time around, they won't have Kawhi to shoot his miracle shot at the buzzer and propel them to the finals. So I think the Sixers would win. And finally, for the Eastern Conference Finals, it would be the 1 seed Bucks versus the 6 seed Philadelphia 76ers. And as you can see, guys, I have the Bucks winning. Although the 76ers basically this offseason were built to stop Giannis with Al Horford, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and everyone they signed this year, I think the Bucks will ultimately have a better team and will win and play the Clippers in the NBA Finals, where this would be a very interesting series. It would go probably to 6 games in my opinion, and I think that the Los Angeles Clippers would get their first NBA title on the backs of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Fortunately, Giannis will be stopped. It just seems like Kawhi, Paul George, and the Clippers would be unstoppable, in my opinion, in this series. And ultimately, the Clippers, in the shortened NBA season, will win the NBA championship, NBA Finals, and be the champions. So there you have it. I miss the NBA, and I want it back. Please come back.